Okay, so some of the fruiting trees on the property. Newton Pippin apple, the favorite apple of George Washington, and an apple that's actually pretty tolerant of neglect.
What kind of apple?
Newton Pippin.
Pippin.
You'll occasionally see these in the health food store in a 3-pound bag because it is a favorite of organic growers. One of these beautiful tart sweet things. Surrounding the area, black walnut trees. You'll occasionally one of those will land on the roof over here and make you jump. A couple trees planted by my grandfather 50 years ago and now have all these offspring. A Chinese chestnut tree. We were just under it. It reaches over the tractor, and that's got these little burrs with nuts in them. That's the chestnut they sell on the streets of New York City, roasted.
What's the vine?
Oh, hardy kiwi on the vines right here. This is a kiwi that will grow in this climate, about the size and shape of a Thompson seedless grape, no fuzz, and by almost all votes, sweeter than the fuzzy kiwi. And a favorite of organic farmers because no pests or disease have yet found it. And at the end of the trellis is an old grapevine, an old Concord grapevine. There were Concord vineyards. This was an Italian facility, and there were vineyards throughout the farm. So in the boom years, this was commonly a flower garden right here. The immediacy to the farm stand, you could pick your own, and it was a fine site. And in fact, in the grandfather days, this was the garden going way back. A couple of ancient pear trees here. Originally, this was an ancient pear orchard here. And there's still fruit on those trees. They are of a variety of pear that predates tasty pears. And so they never get soft. And they're not like a Bartlett of these days.
What species is that?
You know, don't know. I was telling,
Oriental pear?
you know, it hints of that, but it looks like a European pear. But the way it never softens, you could find one on the ground and sample it. Anyway, I actually had a commercial pear grower in Washington State expressed interest in the genetics of those trees. That because he was interested in pear, what do you call it? Pear alcohol, basically. Pear cider that's alcoholic. And very odd flavored pears are just a ticket. Anyway, to the agricultural fields. So the agricultural fields, starting out at the road, a very important field. The world, this surrounding world that has never seen a working farm, or at least in this area anymore. I mean, go back 20 years ago and there were still a few, but basically this would be the last working farm in this town and in quite a few surrounding towns. So the cars will slow down. I know how to stop traffic. A manure spreader, spreading manure, will stop traffic. But I've always felt like there's tremendous value there, and with some of these aspirations for this being an educational facility, whatever goes out by that road is instant education. And so a clay loam. We, for years, parked our manure spreader at a riding stable around the corner, and were able to bomb this farm with compost and manure for close to 20 years, giving the soil an organic matter content of 6%. The average is closer to 1% in a usual soil. And that...
Can you repeat that? I'm taking notes.
Yes, yes. Organic matter content, soil organic matter, 6%. Now that may have started to drop a little because you kind of need to keep adding the compost to maintain that. That's something that's being digested and consumed by the plants and so forth. But I'm sure it's still up there. And just the benefits to a plant, the crop health of being in that rich of a soil. A strong plant fends off disease, a strong plant fends off insects. And I've seen this so starkly at my new location in Hunterdon, where the soil doesn't have this kind of health. And crops, I've had pests that I've never had on crops that never had any pests in my farming life here. Anyway, it's a nice starting point. Right, so welcome to the pond. Built by my grandparents in the 50s. It was already a naturally wet spot on the property. All they had to do was make a hole. It does have fish in it, bass and bluegills, which is supposed to be, the two keep each other in balance. The bass eats the bluegill. The water lilies were planted by my grandfather as an ornamental. They have big showy flowers that open in the morning and then close in the afternoon. And it's turned into a bit of a spreading nuisance. But also in here are grass-eating carp, something you can mail order. This finer floating weed is something that appeared about 3 or 4 years ago, came in on a duck or something, a bladderwort, and in its first season basically covered the surface of the pond. Then we got these carp, and they appear to be doing the job. And you might see them lolling around. They kind of hang at the surface. They're supposed to eat the lily pads. As the lily pad is coming up from the bottom in the early spring, they'll eat it then, but once it's on the top, they won't eat it. Anyway, we used to periodically wade in here and pull lily pads out, which was a fine activity, always ensuing in a slime fight. The bottom of the pond is quite squishy. Right. Years of tree leaves blowing in here, they land on the water, they stick, they sink. And it's true that when you bring it up, it's black. Say again? Yes. In that corner, a spring comes down the hill. In dry weather, the flow dries up. It's a wet weather spring.